The scent of beans and chili, usually a source of comfort, felt suffocating tonight in our small kitchen. The sound of the front door opening was a familiar trigger, sending a jolt of anxiety through me. With practiced speed, I tucked a small bottle of pills deep into the secret pocket I'd carefully sewn inside my apron. A few crumpled bills were already concealed there, a small, desperate act of independence in a life increasingly defined by control. "I'm home!" Roger's voice echoed from the entryway. It carried the weariness of a long day, but for the moment, it lacked the sharp edge that signaled trouble. That brief pause between his arrival and the reveal of his mood was always a moment of fragile hope. "In the kitchen," I called back, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, turning down the heat under the simmering pot. Roger appeared in the doorway, his uniform looking rumpled, his tie loosened. He was a shadow of the charming, confident man I'd fallen for 2 years ago. But tonight, he wasn't yet the cruel figure he often became. He was simply a man exhausted by 12 hours of watching a parking lot, a job he clearly despised since the loss of his supervisor position had stripped away his sense of status. "Smells good," he said, offering a quick, almost absent kiss on my cheek before sinking into a chair at the small kitchen table. I allowed myself a silent breath of relief. Nights when Roger returned home in a relatively calm state had become increasingly rare since his job loss. His temper had frayed, his patience worn thin. "How was your day?" I asked, pouring him a glass of iced tea, attempting a casual tone to maintain the fragile peace. "New boss is a complete idiot," he snapped, his voice instantly turning hard. The shift in his mood was instantaneous, like a light switch flipping. "What about you? Did you actually accomplish anything useful today? Or did you just sit around and figure out new ways to spend money?" The question wasn't genuine inquiry. It was an accusation, a familiar opening salvo that tightened the knot in my stomach. "I cleaned the Miller's house and Mrs. Henderson's," I replied, keeping my gaze fixed on the pot. "I have 2 more cleaning jobs lined up for tomorrow." I tried to project an image of being busy, productive, hoping it might deflect his building irritation. Roger nodded, but his attention had already drifted. His eyes landed on my cell phone, which was vibrating silently on the counter. A text message. Before I could even think to grab it, he reached across the table and picked it up. "Who is texting you at this hour?" he demanded, his fingers already unlocking the screen without a moment's hesitation. My stomach plummeted. I had foolishly left the message preview setting on, a small convenience that now felt like a catastrophic error. Panic surged through me. "It must be Mrs. Henderson confirming my time for tomorrow," I stammered, trying desperately to sound casual, but my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Roger read the message aloud, his voice flat at first, then hardening with each word. "Thanks, honey, for the $50 you sent. This helped us get some of your mother's medicine. God bless you, Dad." His face went stone cold, his eyes narrowing to slits. $50? When exactly did you send this money?" I continued stirring the pot, the spoon clanking against the metal with nervous energy. Every muscle in my body tensed, ready for confrontation. "This afternoon," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I stopped by the money order place right after I finished at Mrs. Henderson's. It was from tips I earned at the diner." "Your tips. Let me make this clear, Sophia. Everything that comes into this house belongs to us," he stated, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous pitch I had come to dread. "We are married, remember. What you earn is not yours alone to spend however you please." He continued scrolling through my phone, examining past messages, his thumb swiping methodically. "How often have you been sending them money without telling me?" he asked, not looking up from the screen. "Here's another thank you message from last month. And look, another one before that." "They were only small amounts," I argued softly, trying to diffuse the situation. and I only sent it when they were in real need for medicine or food. The knot in my stomach tightened further. His gaze lifted from the phone, sweeping across the kitchen until it stopped on a small shopping bag sitting on the counter near the sink. I had completely forgotten about it in my haste to hide the pills in my apron. "And what is this?" he asked, placing the phone down and walking slowly towards the bag. His movements were deliberate, menacing. "It's just some basic medicine for my mother," I responded, my voice trembling slightly. "It wasn't expensive, just some cough syrup and vitamins." Roger examined the contents of the bag, his face unreadable, a mask of cold displeasure. "So you lie to me," he said finally, his voice still that chilling low tone. "You hide money from me and buy things like this without consulting me. You go behind my back like a sneak." "I bought them with the extra money I earned washing curtains for Mrs. Henderson." I lied again, the words feeling dry and false in my mouth. In reality, the money had come from my carefully hidden savings. Roger stared at me, his eyes darkening, his face hardening into a mask of contempt. The tension in the small kitchen was so palpable it felt like it was crushing the air from my lungs. "Do you know what I feel when I look at you right now?" he asked, his voice like ice, cutting through the oppressive silence. "Disgust. You absolutely disgust me, Sophia." Each word was a heavy stone dropped onto my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt myself recoil internally, wanting desperately to disappear, to become invisible against the cruelty in his voice. "Crawling to your parents, giving away our hard-earned money, lying to your own husband, hiding things like a common thief," Roger continued, his voice rising slightly, filled with bitter scorn. "You make me sick. Where is the honest, decent woman I thought I married?" With a sudden, sharp movement, not a physical strike against me, but an act of deliberate destruction, he swept the bag off the counter onto the floor. The cheap cardboard boxes burst open, the plastic bottles rolled across the linoleum, and the pills scattered like colorful beads. "No!" I cried out, a small, desperate sound escaping my lips, dropping instantly to my knees to try and gather the scattered medicine. This was medicine my mother urgently needed. "Mirate," Roger said, his voice heavy with contempt. "Look at you, crawling on the floor for some cheap pills while I work myself to death trying to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table." I continued picking up the pills, ignoring the hot tears that were beginning to blur my vision. Some of the medicine bottles looked intact. If I could just gather them quickly, maybe I could salvage enough. Roger's foot came down on my hand, not with crushing force, but firm enough to stop my movements, to force me to look at him. "When I am speaking to you, you look at me." Slowly, I lifted my head, my eyes meeting his. Where I had once seen affection, or at least warmth, now I saw only cold, hard control and resentment. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words feeling utterly weak and useless in the face of his anger. Roger seemed to read the desperate hope in my eyes that I might still save the medicine. With deliberate slowness, he began to step on the scattered pills, grinding them into dust under the sole of his boot. "You know exactly why I am doing this," he said, his voice calm but chillingly menacing. "This is to teach you a lesson, Sophia. This is to protect you from yourself, from your own foolishness, so you understand who is in charge here." A hot spark of something other than fear ignited deep within me. My fingers, hidden in my apron pocket, brushed against the small bottle of pills I had hidden earlier. He hadn't found everything. Roger returned to the table, picking up my phone again. "How much did you make today at the Miller's house?" $60, I answered automatically, my mind still reeling from the destruction on the floor. "And how much did Mrs. Henderson pay you?" $55. She paid extra for the curtains." Roger put the phone down. "From this moment on, you will show me every single dollar you earn. When you get home, The first thing you do is put all the money you made on this table. Every single dollar, if I ever find out you are hiding even 1 penny from me." He didn't need to finish the threat. The look in his eyes was enough. "Roger, I always brought the money home," I protested softly, trying one last time to reason with him. "I just used a little bit from my tips. Money that wasn't—" "There is no your money or your tips," he roared, slamming his hand down on the table, making the dishes jump. "I allow you to work, but that does not give you the right to spend that money without my explicit permission. It is our money, and I decide how it is spent." I felt his control wrapping tighter around me, suffocating me. It wasn't merely about money anymore. It was about my autonomy, my ability to help my family, my very sense of self-worth and dignity. "I understand," I said quietly, looking down at the floor, knowing that any further argument would only escalate his anger. "This isn't about being mean, Sophia. This is about protecting you," he insisted, his voice shifting, trying to sound reasonable, even caring. "People out there will take advantage of you. Only I truly care about what is best for us, for our future." His words were a performance, a twisted justification for his control. His eyes held only possessiveness. "Clean up this mess," he ordered, walking towards the living room, leaving me kneeling amidst the scattered pills. "And remember, no more sending money to your parents without my permission. If they truly need something, we will discuss it together." As I began the humiliating task of gathering the broken boxes and scattered pills, I calculated the cost to replace them. A quiet resolve hardened within me. I had to be smarter, more careful. Extra shifts I didn't report, hidden cash, secret messages passed through trusted friends. I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. A secret fund. Somewhere he will never, ever think to look. Amidst the debris of the destroyed medicine, a quiet, fierce determination took root. The television drone from the living room signaled Roger had moved on, satisfied with his display of power. He didn't know that while I cleaned the physical mess, my mind was already mapping out a path of resistance, fueled by a quiet rage and a stubborn refusal to be completely broken. 2 years before, the fear became a constant companion. The air at Mrs. Garcia's diner, affectionately known as the Corner Spot, was always warm and fragrant with the smell of fresh tortillas and brewing coffee. It was my world then, a place where smiles were genuine and interactions felt simple and safe. At 30, I felt comfortable and confident, my natural looks drawing friendly, respectful glances from regulars. I had worked there for 5 years, long enough to comfortably support myself and, more importantly, to send a substantial portion of my earnings home to my parents, Henry and Margaret. Their health was a constant, low-level worry that underscored my daily efforts. "Here you go, Mr. Peterson," I said, placing his usual order in front of him. "Thanks, honey." He winked, a familiar gesture. "Nobody makes coffee taste better or serves it with a sweeter smile than you, Sophia." I smiled back, moving to wipe down a table by the large front window, humming softly to myself. The bell above the door jingled, announcing a new arrival. A man walked in, tall and broad-shouldered, with an undeniable presence that seemed to fill the space. He scanned the diner, his eyes moving deliberately until they met mine across the room. An unexpected flutter started in my chest, a sensation I hadn't felt in a long time. He smiled then, a slow, warm expression that completely transformed his face, making him seem approachable and kind. "Good afternoon," he said, walking directly towards me. "Is there a table available for one?" "Right this way," I managed, my voice feeling a little breathless, leading him to my favorite table by the window, where the afternoon light was best. "My name is Roger," he said, his gaze steady and direct as he extended a hand. "Roger Davis." "Sophia," I replied, shaking his hand, surprised by the immediate ease and connection I felt. He sat down, picking up the menu, but his eyes quickly returned to mine. "What do you recommend? I trust your judgment completely." His intense focus made me feel uniquely seen, singled out in a way that was both flattering and a little unnerving. Over the next few weeks, Roger became a consistent presence. He would arrive at the same time each day, always requesting my section, always sitting at the window table. He was unfailingly polite, charming, and left generous tips. He would chat easily, telling me stories from his job as a security supervisor, painting a picture of a stable, successful man. He made me laugh, seemed genuinely interested in my life, and slowly, he chipped away at my quiet reserve. "Would you let me buy you a coffee sometime after your shift?" he asked one afternoon, his smile warm and inviting. I said yes, something I rarely did. That first coffee after work stretched into a long conversation, which led to walks in the park, movie nights, and sharing intimate details about our lives. I told him about my parents, their ongoing illnesses, and the financial strain it put on me. I braced myself for concern, perhaps even a polite excuse to distance himself. Instead, Roger reached across the table and took my hand, his grip warm and reassuring. "You are an incredible woman, Sophia," he said, his voice filled with what seemed like genuine admiration. "Your loyalty to your family, your willingness to sacrifice for them. It speaks volumes about your character." His words resonated deeply. For the first time, someone seemed to truly value my efforts for my parents, seeing them not as a burden or a weakness, but as a strength, a testament to who I was. Things moved quickly after that. Roger was attentive, romantic, showering me with small gifts and remembering details about my life. He made me feel like the most important person in his world. There were occasional moments that gave me pause, a flash of impatience with a slow waiter, an aggressive maneuver while driving, but I rationalized them as stress from his demanding job, minor flaws in an otherwise wonderful man. One afternoon, while walking downtown, we passed a street vendor. She was striking, dark, expressive eyes, long black hair, and an air of fierce independence as she sold handmade bracelets. "Roger Davis!" the woman exclaimed, her voice sharp with surprise and something that sounded distinctly like old, unresolved anger. Roger froze beside me, his body tensing instantly. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then mumbled, "Jessica, what a surprise seeing you here." Jessica smiled, but her eyes remained cold and assessing as they flicked between Roger and me. "Still up to your old tricks, Roger? Always so quick to replace what you break, aren't you?" "This is really not a good time, Jessica," Roger said curtly, his voice suddenly cold, pulling my arm firmly to steer me away. "Sophia, let's just go." He hurried me away from the vendor, silent and distant for the rest of the day. When I finally asked him about her later, he shrugged dismissively. "Nobody important, just some crazy woman from my old neighborhood. Don't worry about it." I didn't push for more details, but Jessica's piercing look and her cryptic words, "always so quick to replace what you break," lingered in my mind. What exactly had Roger broken? Who was this woman, and what was their history? It was a question that planted a tiny seed of unease, a question I wouldn't understand the full, dark significance of until much later. 4 months after we met, Roger suggested we move in together. The speed of it surprised me, felt a little rushed, but his reasoning sounded so loving and logical. "Life is too short, Sophia. I know without a doubt that you are the woman I want to spend my life with. Why waste time living apart when we can start building our life together right now?" It made sense. His apartment was larger and nicer than mine, and my lease was ending soon. My parents expressed some gentle worry about how fast things were moving, but I reassured them, painting a picture of a good, stable man who respected me and valued my connection to them. I even sent them a photo, Roger and me, smiling brightly in front of his apartment building, a picture that hid the subtle cracks already forming beneath the surface. Living together, I began to see fleeting glimpses of a possessiveness that lay beneath Roger's charm. During moments of intimacy, his grip could sometimes be too tight, leaving faint marks on my arms. His whispered words felt less like declarations of love and more like claims of ownership. "You're mine now," he'd murmur, his voice low. "Completely mine." He never physically hurt me in these moments, but the line between passionate intensity and controlling possession felt increasingly blurred. I told myself it was just the intensity of his feelings, the newness of sharing a life. Sometimes, Jessica's face would flash into my mind, her words echoing. "Always so quick to replace what you break." I didn't know then that Jessica was more than just a dismissed figure from Roger's past. She was a harbinger, the first subtle warning sign of the deep, dark iceberg of control and possessiveness that was about to become my reality. The transition to living together settled into a new, shared rhythm, though one that Roger increasingly orchestrated. Early on, he suggested I cut back my hours at the diner. His supervisor salary was more than enough, he insisted. There was no need for me to work such long shifts. I agreed to reduce my hours, but firmly stated I didn't want to quit entirely. "I like working," I told him one evening while we were making dinner together. "It makes me feel independent, like I'm contributing in my own way." "You contribute plenty just by being here, making a home for us," he replied, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "But fine, keep your little job if it makes you happy." His tone was indulgent, but the underlying message was clear. My work was secondary, a hobby he permitted. In those early months, he was still thoughtful, making coffee in the mornings, helping keep the apartment tidy, bringing home small gifts. But subtly, the questions about my schedule began to intensify. He needed to know exactly where I was going, who I would be with, and precisely when I would be back. "It's just that the city can be dangerous, especially for a beautiful woman like you, Sophia," he'd say when I asked about his constant calls and texts when I was out. "I just need to know you're safe. I worry about you constantly." It sounded like concern, like love, but the questions quickly morphed into interrogations. "Who did you talk to at the diner? Why were you 10 minutes later than you said you'd be? Did you stop anywhere on the way home?" His tone wasn't worried. It was suspicious, probing. One afternoon, the phone rang while I was cooking dinner. Roger was in the living room watching TV. It was my father, Henry, his voice thin and shaky with worry. "Your mother's gotten worse, Sophia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if sharing a painful secret. "The doctor recommends a new treatment. It's more expensive than anything we've tried. But it's the best chance she has." My heart sank, a heavy weight in my chest. "How much do you need, Dad?" I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice steady, hoping Roger wouldn't overhear the panic rising within me. $1,000 to start?" Dad replied, his voice filled with embarrassment, like he was asking for an impossible favor. "You don't have to. I know things are tight for everyone." "I'll get it, Dad," I promised, my mind racing, already calculating hours and savings. "Give me a few days. I'll figure something out." When I hung up, I saw Roger standing in the doorway, watching me, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of apparent emotion. I hesitated. Roger had seemed understanding about my parents' situation up to this point, but $1,000 was a significant amount of money. I didn't want to create a problem, didn't want to see that subtle shift in his eyes that signaled displeasure. "My mother needs a new treatment," I explained, keeping my voice low. "It's expensive, but I can cover some of it with my savings and ask for extra hours at the diner. I'll manage." I expected him to react negatively, to complain about the cost, to express frustration. But Roger surprised me completely. "Let me help," he offered, his voice soft and genuinely sincere. He walked over to me, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "They're your parents, Sophia. They're family. Your problems are my problems now. We're in this together." The wave of thankfulness that washed over me was immense, overwhelming. This was the man I had chosen, the man I loved, generous, understanding, willing to share my burdens, to help my family in their time of desperate need. It felt like a powerful affirmation, a sign that I had made the right decision about him, that our future was secure and shared. "Thank you, Roger," I mumbled, my eyes filling with sudden tears, hugging him tightly. "I'll pay you back, every single dollar." "Don't even think about paying me back, Sophia," he replied, holding me close. "There's no yours and mine between us anymore. We're a team now. Everything we have is shared. In fact, why don't we make this official? Let's get married." The proposal, coming so suddenly after just a few months of living together, caught me off guard. But Roger's timing felt perfect, almost divinely orchestrated. He was offering tangible help to my family when they needed it most, demonstrating his commitment and his care in the most profound way. It felt like the natural, inevitable next step, a way to solidify our bond and face whatever the future held, together as husband and wife. Coming so suddenly after just a few months of living together, caught me off guard. But Roger's willingness to help my family felt like a profound commitment. It felt right. We decided to get married quickly at the courthouse, a simple, unadorned ceremony attended by just a couple of friends from the diner as our witnesses. It felt like a fresh start, a promise of a safe, stable, shared future. After the wedding, the subtle threads of Roger's control began to tighten, slowly at first, like a knot being pulled tighter and tighter until it became suffocating. His first major step was insisting that we combine all our financial resources into one joint bank account. "It's just so much easier this way, Sophia," he explained, sitting at the kitchen table, spreading out bank forms. "Everything we earn, everything we have, is ours, together. No more separate accounts, no more keeping track of who pays for what. We're a team now, a single unit, financially intertwined." He took over the responsibility of paying all the bills, managing the household budget, and deciding where the money went. Initially, it seemed like a helpful division of labor. He was organized, good with numbers, and seemed to enjoy the task. But soon, I found myself having to ask him for money for basic necessities, groceries, bus fare to get to my cleaning jobs, even for small personal items like shampoo or new socks. Every single request was met with scrutiny, with questions and implied suspicion. "Do you really need that?" Or, "Can't you make do with what we already have?" Or, "Are you absolutely certain you didn't already buy that last week?" My small savings, the money I had worked so hard to put away dollar by dollar, disappeared into the joint account, and suddenly, the money I earned cleaning houses and working my limited shifts at the diner no longer felt like it belonged to me. It was our money, yes, but only Roger held the power to decide how we would spend it. My financial independence, however small it had been, was completely gone. Then came the seismic shift. Roger lost his supervisor job. "The company downsized," he said, a victim of corporate restructuring. The blow to his pride was immense, crippling. He became bitter, consumed by a simmering rage directed at the world, at his former boss, at anyone he could blame for his sudden loss of status and income. The low-paying security guard job he eventually found did nothing to alleviate his resentment. He hated it, felt it was beneath him, and he carried that hate, that corrosive resentment, home with him every single day like a toxic cloud. The kind, understanding man who had offered to help my parents vanished completely. The money he had given them for my mother's treatment. He began demanding it back, not from them directly, but from me, making it my responsibility to repay him. "Your freeloading parents owe me that money," he would yell, his face contorted with anger. "That was our money. They're just using you, using us. They don't care about you, Sophia, only what they can get from you." He hurled insults at my parents, calling them burdens, saying I was stupid, weak, and easily manipulated for continuing to care for them. The verbal abuse became a constant, relentless barrage of criticism, insults, and put-downs. It was like living on a battlefield, constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing what small, insignificant thing would set him off. A misplaced item in the apartment, a meal he didn't like, a brief phone call from my parents, anything, no matter how trivial, could trigger an explosion of angry words, baseless accusations, and soul-crushing put-downs. His eyes would turn dark and cold, his jaw would clench tight, his hands would often be balled into fists at his sides. He would stand over me, his body language physically intimidating, making me feel small, trapped, and completely vulnerable. He would corner me in rooms, blocking the doorway, his voice dropping to a low, mean whisper, telling me how worthless I was, how lucky I was that he even bothered to stay with me, that anyone could possibly put up with someone like me. "Nobody else would ever want you, Sophia," he would sneer, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look at you. You're nothing special. You are absolutely nothing without me. You'd be completely lost and alone." He exerted control over where I went and who I talked to. If I went to the grocery store, he demanded to know exactly which one and precisely how long I was there. He would check my cell phone constantly, reading my text messages, scrolling through my call history. If he saw me talking to a friend, even a quick, innocent chat at the diner, he would interrogate me about it later, suspicious of what I might have been saying about him. My world gradually shrunk down to the four walls of our apartment and the few hours I was allowed to work, always under his watchful eye or the looming threat of his questions and accusations when I returned home. I stopped visiting my parents. It was too difficult to explain what was happening, too painful to see the worry in their eyes, to force myself to lie and pretend that everything was fine. I would call them only when Roger wasn't around, whispering quickly, telling them I was okay, that I would send money as soon as I possibly could. But sending money became an almost impossible task. Every single dollar I earned had to go directly into the joint account, to be accounted for, scrutinized, and ultimately controlled by Roger. The fear was a constant, heavy weight in my stomach, a cold, suffocating presence. Fear of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing. Fear of his unpredictable anger, of the next inevitable outburst. I felt utterly isolated, alone, cut off from everyone who cared about me, everyone who knew the real me. The charming, supportive man I had married was gone, replaced by a stranger, a captor who used control, fear, and psychological manipulation to keep me trapped, to make me feel like I deserved his cruel treatment. I was living a nightmare, and I had no idea how to wake up from it or how to find a way to escape. Kneeling on the cold linoleum, gathering the scattered, crushed remnants of her mother's medicine, Sophia felt a chilling clarity settle over her. The raw, burning humiliation of Roger's actions had momentarily stunned her, but beneath the shock, a hard, cold core of defiance was forming. His words, meant to break her spirit, had instead forged something new and steely within her. Disgust. "You disgust me, Sophia. You're nothing without me." The echoes of his contempt fueled a silent, desperate resolve. She wasn't nothing. She was a daughter who loved her parents, a woman who worked hard, a person who deserved respect and agency. The fear was still a heavy cloak, but now a tiny pinprick of light, a desperate hope, began to pierce through the darkness. She had to find a way out. The immediate aftermath of the incident was a tense, suffocating silence. Roger retreated, satisfied with his display of power, leaving Sophia to clean up the mess, both physical and emotional. She moved through the rest of the evening on autopilot, the taste of ash in her mouth, the image of his boot crushing the pills seared into her mind. Later, lying awake in bed, feigning sleep beside his quiet, steady breathing, her mind raced. The secret pocket in her apron, the small amount of cash and the hidden bottle of pills felt like a lifeline. It was a start, a symbol of her hidden resistance. But it wasn't enough. She needed more than secret stashes. She needed a plan. The next day was a blur of forced normalcy. Sophia went to her cleaning jobs, her smile feeling brittle, her conversations with clients strained. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped, expecting a text or call from Roger checking up on her. He didn't call, but the silence felt just as oppressive as his presence. It was a reminder that his control was invisible, pervasive, extending even into the space he wasn't physically occupying. During her lunch break, sitting alone in her car, she pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she opened the browser. She knew Roger checked her phone history sometimes, but she had to take the risk. She searched cautiously, using vague terms at first: help for difficult relationships, support for spouses. The results were overwhelming, a mix of relationship counseling sites and, more disturbingly, resources for domestic abuse. The words on the screen felt like a punch to the gut, yet also a validation: control, isolation, financial abuse, verbal abuse. It was like reading a description of her own life, laid bare on the internet. She quickly closed the browser, her heart pounding. She couldn't leave a trace. She needed a safer way. Her thoughts turned to Brittany, her friend from the diner. Brittany was kind, practical, and had a quiet strength Sophia admired. They hadn't talked much since she married Roger. He discouraged her friendships, subtly suggesting Brittany was a bad influence. But Brittany was the only person she felt she could trust. That evening, while Roger was engrossed in a football game, Sophia managed a quick, hushed phone call to Brittany. "Hey, it's me," Sophia whispered, her voice tight with urgency. "Sophia. Wow, haven't heard from you in ages. Everything okay?" Brittany's voice was warm, genuinely happy to hear from her. "Not really," Sophia admitted, the dam of her carefully constructed composure threatening to break. "Brittany, I need help. Things are really bad." She couldn't say more with Roger just rooms away. She spoke in veiled terms, hinting at financial trouble and Roger's temper, omitting the worst details out of fear. Brittany, sensing the unspoken terror in Sophia's voice, immediately offered support. "Can you meet? Somewhere Roger doesn't know about?" Brittany asked, her tone serious. They arranged to meet the next day during Sophia's cleaning route, at a small, out-of-the-way park. Meeting Brittany felt like stepping into a different world, a world where people smiled freely and the air didn't feel heavy with unspoken threats. Sitting on a park bench, Sophia finally allowed herself to tell Brittany everything: the financial control, the verbal abuse, the isolation, the incident with her mother's medicine. As she spoke, the shame and fear were still present, but sharing the burden, saying the words out loud, felt like releasing a pressure valve. Brittany listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to shock to quiet anger. When Sophia finished, Brittany didn't offer platitudes or judgment. "Sophia," she said softly, taking Sophia's hand. "This isn't okay. This isn't a normal marriage. This is abuse." Hearing the word spoken aloud was jarring, but it was also a confirmation. Brittany had resources, contacts. She knew people who worked at local shelters, in domestic violence support groups. She pulled out her phone and showed Sophia websites, phone numbers, information about legal aid and restraining orders. The concept of a restraining order felt terrifying. It meant confronting Roger directly, escalating the situation. But Brittany explained it wasn't just about protection. It was a legal step towards creating physical and emotional space, a way to break the cycle of control. Sophia left the park that day with a stack of brochures hidden in her bag and a flicker of hope in her heart. The path ahead was daunting, fraught with danger, but she wasn't alone anymore. Brittany's support was a lifeline. She started making small, careful steps. A burner phone, purchased with hidden cash from her secret apron pocket, became her secure line to Brittany and the resources she was researching. She learned about safety planning, about gathering important documents, about the best time to leave. The fear of Roger's reaction when he discovered her plans was immense, a cold dread that sometimes threatened to paralyze her. But the thought of her parents, of her mother's illness, and the crushing weight of living under Roger's control fueled her determination. She practiced her movements, planned her escape route, mentally rehearsed the difficult conversations she would need to have. The process was slow, painstaking, and terrifying, but with each small, secret step, Sophia felt a tiny piece of herself returning, a sense of agency she hadn't realized she had lost until she started fighting to reclaim it. She was no longer just surviving. She was preparing to escape. The idea of a restraining order, once terrifying, now felt like a necessary shield, a legal boundary she had to establish to protect herself and finally break free from Roger's suffocating grip. The day Sophia served the restraining order was a blur of adrenaline and fear. With the quiet, steady support of Brittany and a legal aid advocate, she had navigated the complex paperwork, detailing the pattern of abuse, the financial control, the verbal attacks, and the escalating intimidation. The judge, reading her affidavit, had seen the clear and present danger. The order was granted, prohibiting Roger from contacting her, coming near their apartment or her workplace. Serving it required police presence, a necessary but terrifying step that felt both liberating and incredibly dangerous. As the officers escorted Roger from the apartment, his face a mask of shock and fury, Sophia felt a profound, shaky release, quickly followed by an intense vulnerability. She was safe for now, but she knew Roger's rage would be immense. The immediate aftermath meant finding a place of safety. The legal aid advocate had arranged for her to stay at a local women's shelter. It was a stark, communal living space, but it offered anonymity and protection. The first few days were a period of intense anxiety. Every unexpected noise, every unfamiliar face, sent a jolt of fear through her. She was physically safe, but her mind was still trapped in the patterns of fear and hypervigilance Roger had instilled. Brittany visited often, bringing comfort and practical help. She helped Sophia gather essential documents from the apartment under police supervision, retrieve some clothes, and secure her few remaining personal belongings. It was during one of these visits that Brittany brought a friend, Sarah. Sarah was a vibrant, warm woman, a producer for a local television show focused on community stories. She had heard about Sophia through Brittany and wanted to offer support. Sarah's energy was infectious, a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere of the shelter. She didn't pry or push, she simply offered genuine kindness and solidarity. On her second visit, Sarah arrived with a large box. "This is for you, Sophia," Sarah said, her eyes sparkling. "Brittany mentioned you used to love making things, and I thought this might give you something positive to focus on." Inside the box was a complete candle-making kit, different waxes, wicks, essential oils, dyes, molds, and a comprehensive online course subscription. It was a thoughtful, unexpected gift. Sophia had loved making candles as a teenager, a hobby she had long abandoned under the pressures of supporting her family and, later, living with Roger. Hesitantly at first, Sophia began working with the kit in the small, designated craft area at the shelter. The simple, repetitive tasks of melting wax, Adding scents and colors and pouring the mixture into molds were surprisingly therapeutic. The fragrant oils filled the air, a welcome change from the sterile smell of the shelter. Focusing on the process quieted the anxious chatter in her mind. As the first few candles solidified, perfect and fragrant, a sense of accomplishment, small but significant, bloomed within her. It was something she had created, something beautiful and entirely her own. She started making more, experimenting with different scents and colors. The other women at the shelter admired them, asking if they could buy them. This sparked an idea. Could this hobby become more? Could it provide a path towards financial independence, a way to rebuild her life? While Sophia was slowly finding her footing at the shelter, Roger was escalating his attempts to regain control. The restraining order had cut off his direct access to her, but his rage hadn't subsided. He began contacting her parents, harassing them with phone calls and threatening messages, demanding to know where Sophia was, blaming them for her leaving. This was a direct violation of the restraining order, which explicitly prohibited him from contacting anyone connected to Sophia for the purpose of reaching her. Sophia's parents, terrified but also protective of their daughter, immediately contacted the police. When officers arrived to arrest Roger for violating the restraining order, they found him in possession of an unregistered firearm. The discovery added a dangerous new dimension to his charges, confirming the underlying threat Sophia had felt for so long. Roger was taken into custody, held for violating the order and the new weapon charge. News of Roger's arrest brought a wave of mixed emotions for Sophia. Relief that he was contained, but also a renewed sense of fear about what would happen next. He was facing serious charges now, and a court battle was inevitable. But for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt a fragile sense of safety. She was still confined, her movements restricted by the need for security. But the physical distance from Roger, enforced by law and reinforced by his arrest, allowed her the space to breathe, to think, and to continue building her small, fragrant creations. The candles, once just a hobby, now felt like a tangible symbol of her resilience, a small, glowing light pushing back against the darkness. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived, heavy with anticipation and dread. Sophia had spent weeks preparing with her legal aid lawyer, recounting the years of subtle manipulation, the financial strangulation, the escalating verbal abuse, the destruction of her mother's medicine, and finally, the terrifying violation of the restraining order and the discovery of the weapon. Each retelling was emotionally draining, forcing her to relive the trauma, but it also solidified her resolve. She wasn't just a victim, she was a witness, and her testimony was crucial. Brittany and Sarah were unwavering in their support. They attended meetings with her lawyer, offered emotional strength, and helped her practice speaking clearly and confidently. Sarah, leveraging her connections in local media, had quietly brought some attention to Sophia's case, framing it not just as a domestic dispute, but as a story of a woman fighting for her life and independence against controlling abuse. This public awareness, while adding a layer of pressure, also felt like a form of protection, ensuring the case wouldn't disappear into the system unnoticed. Walking into the courthouse was daunting. The sterile hallways, the stern faces of security guards, the hushed, anxious whispers of people waiting for their cases. It all felt overwhelming. Then she saw him. Roger, seated at the defense table, looking thinner, his face pale, but his eyes still holding that familiar intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. He looked angry, wronged, not remorseful. When it was her turn to testify, Sophia walked to the witness stand, her legs feeling unsteady. She took a deep breath, clutched the small, smooth stone Brittany had given her for courage, and looked at the judge. She avoided Roger's gaze at first, focusing on telling her story clearly, factually, detailing the timeline of control and abuse. Her voice trembled initially, but as she spoke about the financial manipulation, the isolation, the constant criticism, and the fear, Her voice grew stronger, fueled by the injustice of it all. She described the incident with the medicine, the deliberate cruelty of crushing the pills. She recounted the terror of receiving calls from her parents after Roger had contacted them, knowing he had violated the order and was still trying to control her through them. She spoke about the moment she learned he had a weapon, the chilling realization of the physical danger she had been in. As she spoke, she could feel Roger's eyes on her. She finally looked at him, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the day she left. He was trying to intimidate her, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief that she would dare speak against him. But seeing him there, powerless to silence her words in that moment, gave her a surge of strength. She continued her testimony, unwavering, detailing the emotional and psychological toll his actions had taken. During the cross-examination, Roger's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was exaggerating, that she was unstable, that she was motivated by greed. But Sophia remained calm, sticking to the facts. Her quiet dignity, a powerful counterpoint to the lawyer's aggressive questioning. Then, Roger couldn't contain himself any longer. As Sophia calmly answered a question about his threats, he erupted from his seat at the defense table. "She's lying. All lies. She's crazy. She's making it all up," he shouted, his face red with fury, pointing at Sophia. His outburst was sudden, violent, and completely uncontrolled. Court officers immediately moved to restrain him. The courtroom erupted in a brief flurry of shocked murmurs and movement. Roger's lawyer looked mortified. Sophia, though startled, remained outwardly composed, watching his outburst with a sense of grim validation. This was the man she had lived with, his mask of control shattered by his own rage. The judge, after order was restored, looked sternly at Roger. His outburst had done more to prove Sophia's testimony about his volatile temper and lack of control than any words she could have spoken. Considering the violation of the restraining order, the weapon charge, and now his behavior in court, the judge made his decision. Given the defendant's clear disregard for the court's previous order, the nature of the charges including the weapon, and his disruptive behavior here today, I find him to be a significant flight risk and a danger to the victim, the judge stated firmly. Bail is denied. The defendant will be held in custody pending trial. A wave of relief washed over Sophia, so strong her knees almost buckled. He was being held. He couldn't hurt her, couldn't contact her, couldn't intimidate her. Walking out of the courtroom, flanked by Brittany and Sarah, the weight that had pressed down on her for so long felt slightly lighter. The fight wasn't over, but she had faced him, spoken her truth, and taken a crucial step towards reclaiming her life. The judge's decision to hold Roger without bail was a turning point. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a psychological liberation. The constant, low-level hum of fear that had been her background noise for years finally began to fade. She was still cautious, still looking over her shoulder sometimes, but the immediate, suffocating threat was gone. She could breathe again. Staying at the shelter had provided safety, but it was temporary. With Roger in custody, Sophia began the process of finding her own place, a small apartment that felt entirely her own, a space free from the shadows of his presence. It was a modest place, but filling it with her few belongings felt like building a sanctuary, brick by brick. Meanwhile, her candle-making had blossomed. What started as therapy had become a passion, and with Sarah's encouragement, a small business. Sarah had featured Sophia's story and her beautiful candles on her TV segment, focusing on resilience and recovery. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Orders poured in through a simple online page Brittany helped her set up. People were drawn not only to the quality and fragrance of the candles, but also to the story behind them. A story of finding light in darkness. Sophia named her business Inner Flame. The name felt perfect, representing the spark of hope and strength she had found within herself. She poured her energy into creating new scents, designing labels, and fulfilling orders. The work was demanding, but it was also deeply fulfilling. It was tangible proof of her ability to create, to build, to thrive independently. Brittany and Sarah were invaluable. Brittany helped with the business side, managing orders and finances. Sarah continued to promote Inner Flame and connected Sophia with local markets and craft fairs. They spent hours together, packing candles, discussing ideas, their friendship a strong foundation in Sophia's new life. As the business grew, they started talking about opening a physical shop, a place where people could see and smell the candles, a space that could be more than just a retail store. It was Sarah who proposed the idea that resonated most deeply with Sophia. "What if this shop," Sarah suggested during a brainstorming session, "becomes a base for something bigger? What if we start a foundation? Something that helps other women who are going through what you went through." The idea took root instantly. Sophia knew the isolation, the fear, the lack of resources that trapped women in abusive situations. She wanted to offer the kind of practical and emotional support she had received. They decided to call the foundation Flames of Hope, a name that echoed Sophia's business and its message of light and resilience. Sophia, Brittany, and Sarah committed to making it happen. They even brought in Natalie, another friend from the diner who had a background in social work, to help develop the foundation's programs. Amidst this whirlwind of building her business and planning the foundation, Sophia received wonderful news. Her mother had responded well to the new treatment and was recovering steadily. The financial burden was still there, but Sophia could now contribute consistently through Inner Flame, a source of pride and relief for both of them. Months later, the criminal trial took place. Roger was found guilty of violating the restraining order, illegal weapon possession, and making criminal threats. His outburst in court had significantly damaged his credibility. He was sentenced to a substantial prison term. Hearing the judge pronounce the sentence brought a final, definitive sense of closure. The legal chapter of her nightmare was over. Finally, the day came to open the doors of the Inner Flame shop. It was a bright, welcoming space, filled with the warm glow of candles and the scent of possibility. Friends, family, and members of the community gathered to celebrate. The shop wasn't just a place to sell candles. It was a symbol of Sophia's journey, a testament to her strength, and the physical home for the Flames of Hope Foundation. A corner of the shop was dedicated as a meeting space for support groups, a place where women could find resources, connect with others, and see firsthand that escape and healing were possible. Sophia stood in the middle of her shop, surrounded by the warm light of her creations and the love of her friends. She had walked through fire, but she hadn't been consumed. She had emerged, not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and determined to use her experience to light the way for others still trapped in the darkness. Her inner flame, once a tiny spark of defiance, now burned bright, illuminating her own path and offering warmth and hope to countless others. If my story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, what would you've done? And please, don't miss the next video on screen. Thank you.